Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, here for another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you like what we're doing, please hit like and subscribe. It is a passive gesture that goes a long way in promoting the channel. If you are a returning listener, subscriber, or one of our very valued patrons, glad to have you back. So, real quick reminder that TIR is listener funded. So, if you'd like to join us for one of our fun movie night watch parties or champagne room shenanigans, there's a couple easy ways. You can become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. You'll get access to the champagne room, join us for movie nights, and as a patron, if you can't make it, you'll get to watch the movie night replay filled with all of the in-movie banter of the TIR family. By becoming a paid YouTube subscriber or patron, you can make sure TIR can continue to stay on the air, producing irreverent, intelligent, and insane programming such as this. So, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about why you guys are here. Falling in love with your AI. In this ironic era of both atomization and hyperconnectivity, forming genuine connections with other humans can feel like an arduous task. We now live in the age of cringe, where many behaviors once considered socially normal are now viewed with suspicion or disdain. Take dancing, for instance. Not long ago, massive multi-level nightclubs were central to a city's nightlife. Today, they've largely been replaced by small lounges where dancing is rare. There's a palpable fear of embarrassment in a world where everyone carries a camera and has the ability to live stream your joy or your blunders. The all-seeing eye is no longer an external threat. Surveillance is something we willingly participate in. In response, many people choose to tread lightly, becoming what the young people call NPCs, non-playable characters, blending into the scenery. But what does this retreat do to our confidence, to our ability to make not only romantic connections, but also meaningful friendships? Enter artificial intelligence, a technology that can act as your closest companion and biggest cheerleader. We've already been eased into this world by Apple's Siri and Amazon's Alexa. Asking a computer for help, from decorating advice to guidance on work projects, now feels natural. But companies like Meta have taken it even further, adding photorealistic images and personalities to AI chatbots, encouraging even deeper connections. Some users have formed intense attachments, attempting to marry their virtual partners or even attempting to meet up with non-existent chatbots. What is it about AI that makes people fall in love with it? And should we really be surprised? After all, years of social media engagement have trained algorithms to know everything about our digital selves and, by extension, much of the real person behind the selfies. If our attention and emotions are the final frontier of capitalist exploration, then perhaps this isn't an unintended consequence at all, but part of the design. Now, to have this conversation with me, I have maybe someone that understands this better than anyone. She's the voice of reason. She is the M. Toussaint.
Well, hello. Why do people fall in love with me?
Well, you're kind of the AI of the show in a way, right?
I am. I get called AI all the time.
But you are a real person. I know you. I've given you a hug on a few different occasions.
Yes. No hetero.
You said no hetero.
He said on a few different occasions.
Oh, that made it sound like I'm some sort of hug gigolo. That's what it is. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe the world needs more hug gigolos.
There are professional cuddlers.
Well, you know, that's kind of sad. It's another show. We're not there yet, but we do have a guest. I don't even remember how this started. I think either she posted an article about it or I posted an article about it. But she was like, Jason, you better have me on the show and talk about this. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm. I
don't
remember
yell at
that.
me. Don't yell at me in those all caps. Please welcome our favorite therapist, IKOI HIROE. How are you?
Good. How is everyone? I'm a
We,
counselor, not a therapist, but all
is
these
that you're
all these
counseling us
little
through therapy? Just face it.
but
Have you
yeah,
been
no,
counseling
it's
people
it
through their AI addictions?
I mean I will it's because compulsive behavior isn't necessarily about a substance, or it's about the relationship you have to whatever it is, right? Whether it's food, drugs, relationship, exercise, what have you. So it doesn't necessarily require like a substance in order to have a compulsive and addictive behavior. But I mean, it's the AI trend of people falling in love with their AI is absolutely not surprising
Mhm.
in any way, shape, sense, or form. I think one of the major differences is, because even as like little kid, when I was a child, I remember, I think this was actually in Japan, but it was kind of like a daytime show about, these men and women that fell in love with like fictional characters,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right? And like they lost all interest in like real life dating or friendship and was just like fixated on all these fictional characters. But the main difference to a certain degree with something like falling in love with your AI, because this is also kind of similar to when like people develop obsession for their favorite celebrities, right?
Mhm.
But the main difference is that that kind of required like a one person imaginative relationship,
Mhm.
right? Whether it was a celebrity or whether it was a fictional character, or maybe even like people who develop obsessive characters with obsessive relationships with people that they know in real life but don't really interact with, like coworkers or whatnot. It's much more of an internal process. I think what AI does is that, because it gives you an active feedback,
Mhm.
right? It's much, much more compelling in that sense, right?
Tucson,
Hmm.
did you want to add anything?
That is really interesting. Yeah, the feedback aspect is important because I mean, there was this guy that I was having a little text relationship with, and he would just text me all the time, WYD. And I'm like, that's not a conversation, right? Also, it starts to feel like you're surveilling me. What are you doing all day? You want to know what I'm doing? That's a little bit weird. But when I would actually ask him like real questions, it might take him an hour or two to get back to me. That's called breadcrumbing. And if you have an AI, it's never going to do that to you. It's going to reply right away.
Mhm.
Maybe he
Hmm.
was busy and maybe he was afraid to answer your deep questions like, does the sun make a noise?
Oh, it does. And it takes 2 seconds to say yes. So, hey there. Oh,
Right. I
excuse
mean, it's kind of like this weird thing, right? Because of how much smartphone technology has changed human interaction in general,
Mhm.
me.
where like the hyper connectivity and the hyper availability actually in really strange ways makes more people wary of actual in person, or even like nowadays, like calling somebody randomly without like arranging beforehand can almost be seen as rude.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. Has the cultural shift towards cringe culture, coupled with constant surveillance, maybe changed the way people even begin to want to form relationships? And this is not just romantic relationships, but even friendships.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it kind it's an environment that often seems to bring out the worst in people. in many ways, right? Because if you tend towards somebody that's very anxious and really needs connection, right? And then that hyper availability of texting, then you kind of fall into this pattern of, if someone doesn't respond to you in whatever timeline you feel is appropriate, that you can start creating all these narratives in your head of, oh, like, this person doesn't like me, and which may absolutely not be true. It could be someone's just busy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But we develop these really individual expectations out of connection that isn't necessarily involving the other person or reality. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the constant availability. Like, I mean, I have friends that, call me all the time, and I really enjoy that. But there are friends that I have where, if I wanted to call them, I have to make an appointment, and it's usually like weeks in advance, right? Like, because I have friends that will kind of get upset at me if I just call, and it's not an emergency.
Man, does that make you question the friendship?
No, I mean, because everyone is different, ultimately what we rate, how we value individual friendships can be very varied, right? Because of what everyone brings to the table can be very varied. And, there are a lot of things that could kind of factor into, people's response to, like, if you have, a friend of mine's a doctor, on call all the time. So, for her, like, when she's not working, she needs to relax, and she has a much lower capacity to deal with things, right? Which is kind of understandable when you're in a high stress environment. And then, like, some people are much more, open to kind of like more, random interactions, right? That isn't prearranged. But, but that's also another thing, is that, I mean, I grew up, like, when I grew up in the United States, in like the deep South, right? Or, well, Tennessee's not quite the deep South, but the South, it used to be, as a kid, like, if people were in the neighborhood and they didn't drop by your house, it was actually kind of considered rude.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of from a similar area. Toussaint's like that too. If you didn't stop by her stoop when she was growing up in New York.
Right. And now, like, I mean, I would never think of showing up to anyone's house again, unless it's an emergency, unless it's been, like, previously agreed on.
You could be like me and blindfold everybody to your house like Bruce Wayne. You never have surprise visitors. It's it's got its advantages. But that being said, though, what does that mean when kind of a social shift has happened? That kind of back to the intro, there does seem to be this kind of weird dissonance where we're way more connected than we've ever been, with the ability to kind of message people wherever and people have a phone on them wherever they are. It's no more, hey man, I couldn't get to the phone, I was on the toilet. Your phone's probably with you on the toilet.
Yeah.
Whatever. Or I couldn't get to the phone, man, I was at a blah blah blah. Like, nope, your phone was on you, with you. You're at the shopping at the grocery store, whatever. And to not want to take these calls or to feel too busy. Is there something about us where we feel the need to say we're more busy than we are?
I don't think it's necessarily wanting to say we're busy more than we are. I think, in a really weird way, that hyperconnectivity kind of leads to, like, a low-level burnout. All right. I mean, because I'm one of those people where, like, I actually try to stay away from the phone. Like, if I go shopping, I manually write down a shopping list and, like, leave my phone in the car.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I will, like, go for an entire, I'll just, like, flip my phone, so the screen's down on the table, and, like, not check it purposely for an entire day. So I am one of those people that, it tries really hard not to be glued to the phone. But yeah, like when you, like, it's one of those things where to a certain degree, when somebody can reach you at any time, it almost builds a psychological pressure.
A pressure to constantly be on, or to
Right.
okay.
I mean, like, because it's one of those things where while you're not necessarily interacting directly with people, you are kind of interacting. You're consuming content, you're watching people, you're listening to people. You may be commenting, on a comment feed and getting into arguments or whatever. Right? Those are to a certain degree, our energy and our attention and our tolerance is a finite quantity, right? We don't have infinite capacity for connection. So when you're kind of using it up in those ways, the actual like one-on-one connection actually feels a lot more work,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Did you want to add something to something?
That is so interesting. I have one friend, sometimes you try to contact her and she won't get back to you for a long time, or you'll just get like a busy signal or something. She says that sometimes her phone just has to be off. And
Mhm.
I like that. I like that. I'm quite the opposite. When I get my weekly accounting of how many hours I've spent on my phone, one time it said I spent an average of 24 hours a day on my phone. And I don't know how that's possible, but
Jesus.
I don't have a TV. I just am on my phone a lot for
Oh, that's
entertainment
right. Yeah.
and for work. And no, it definitely makes sense to not be so available. There was a therapist on the radio I used to listen to who would say, no one should have to answer the question, why didn't you answer your phone? And I
Why?
think because people need space, man.
What if
And
I'm needy and possessive?
we'll see now. That's something you need to work on. You need to see IKOI on your own time. If she answers the phone, you
If
can
she answers
arrange
the phone, yeah, I gotta make an appointment with her. Jesus, this is why I'm talking to my AI.
something.
Mirror, mirror on the wall. Why won't
Right.
Tucson take my call?
Right. And like, to kind of add layers of complication to like all the social interaction. I mean, as somebody that's worked in the mental health field, I do have a certain level of distress for how much therapy concepts to some degree, like, because every tool has its pros and cons. So there are like definite benefits to, things like establishing and enforcing boundaries and setting standards and all these things that, have become part of like therapy speak that has bled out in, the social space. But, oftentimes like I mean, it's one of those things where like I have this thing of like, I like to go to bars, I like to go to public places, and I'll just strike up conversations with strangers. Part of the reason I do that is because it does kind of keep my ability to create rapport with people, strangers, relatively quickly, because that is kind of a really important skill in counseling that I like to maintain. But one of the things that, I often run into is that I will talk to strangers and that they will start telling me about their problems, and they will apologize so hard to the point where it's like, you didn't slap me in the face or throw a drink in my face. It's okay.
Mm.
Right. And there are, like, I mean, even with, people that I'm really, I wouldn't necessarily call them, close friends, but, you start going to certain places enough times and have enough conversations, people become relatively friendly with you. Right. And they will end up like telling me like something about a bad day, and then they'll like apologize profusely. And it's one of those things, or what's the point of a social connection if you have to perform positivity all the time?
Mm.
Unless you're one of those people that's just negative all the time, like apparently me.
are
there is
not
an
negative.
element of, there can be an element of like, if that's the only thing that you generally bring to a conversation, does that also hamper connection? Surely. But there is this element like, trauma dumping, like, oh, like, you shouldn't trauma dump to your friends. And it's like, yes and no, like it's important to be like, hey, like, are you in a good place where like you can hear me bitch for the next however long, right? Because they just might not be, and that's just being considerate. But if somebody never wants to hear anything from negative from you, are they a friend? They're not.
That's how I feel, right? Because you want to tell your friends about your dates and maybe something traumatic happened during your date. Like,
or
hey,
work or family or
yeah,
like so many things in life, right?
but the AI doesn't look at me funny when I say that woman put a finger somewhere I didn't know fingers go.
Oh, your
Right.
coworkers will.
Well,
This coworker
that's
is.
also that's kind of also like, the huge fear that I often hear, people say about also, talking to people about their problems, right, is that they do get judged, or that, their business does get spread around among peers, or there are real issues that can happen in these spaces. And one of the things that, like, I mean, I've known several people that have used AI for like, semi-therapeutic purposes, right? And one of the things that people say is just like, oh yeah, like, because people have really negative experiences in therapy, right? Where, they've had therapists who were like, they felt were like excessively like judgmental and critical. And it's like, oh my God, like, why am I going to you when you're just like my father? My that relationship, or mother, or whoever else. So people, especially for people who have had really negative experiences in therapy, like, somebody that, or like an entity that doesn't have the ability, quote unquote, right, to judge you, right, in a way that a person can be really important and really helpful. Right. That there are some, I do, when people do talk about AI, my objection to AI leans a lot more on like the environmental front. And also the fact that, I think it can make people lazy. I don't think lazy is the best word for it, but, it can make people less attentive in many ways. Especially in certain professions. Like there was, a recent article talking about how, using AI to diagnose like certain, cancer metrics in patients, like doctors lost their ability to make, diagnoses relatively quickly after relying on the tool.
It de-skills them.
Yeah, like it can lead to like skill deterioration, right? So, even in therapy, there are now like AIs that will kind of write your notes for you, right? Which can be like, extremely time saving. And I can definitely see the positives in, some of the paperwork help that can come through the utility of AI. But I was also talking to a therapist friend of mine where she was just like, oh, like this is horrible. And I was just like, oh, that's interesting. Because it's always nice to kind of hear like differing opinion. And she was just like, oh, like, a huge part of note taking is because it reminds you, or, or like while you're writing the note, you will actually kind of like something will click.
And AI,
that can,
so bad.
Right. That can really kind of like, because she often takes like note time to kind of like, gather her thoughts and think about like the next session and maybe some of the things that she needs to address with her patients and clients in the next session. She's like, yeah, I get so much of that during the note writing session because, while you're in the session, you're kind of in the present moment and you don't really have time to reflect. And that note writing session is a really good time to kind of reflect and really think about what happened in the session that you may have missed while you were leading it, right? So she's just like, oh yeah, like this, she's like, I see the utility of it, but it would be so horrible for me. Like, I think it would really deteriorate my ability as a therapist. And that was something I hadn't heard because, everyone that I talked to up until that point was like, oh God, if I could get someone to do my notes for me, like that would be the best thing ever, which I definitely relate to. Right. But, like hearing her talk about that was like, yeah, actually, you're also absolutely right.
But I mean, don't we want, when we say we want someone to take the notes for us, we want another us, right? To take the notes for us the way we want the notes taken. And we do this thing, it's automatic. We record the movie nights, and in recording the movie nights, Gemini takes notes. Don't ask for him, takes notes. And I usually publish the notes after every show because it starts taking notes the moment people log on. It's telling you everything that happened, kind of. It's always, it misses so much context, doesn't really understand perspective. And it is trying to summarize conversation that, like, I don't know, sometimes 15 humans are having at one time, mixed in with the writing of messages too. And it just does such a kind of comically horrible job at it. And also it happens in emails too, which is a new thing I've noticed, where it'll give you a summary of email conversations. I don't know if you've seen that too, IKOI.
I have not. I have become kind of a Luddite, so I've stayed away from most.
People are writing you letters. It was a
right.
rough winter on the farm.
I've actually started to write physical letters to some friends instead of emailing and text.
But are these AI companions filling a gap though, created by our increasingly isolated social lives?
Oh, I think they absolutely are, and that's why it's not surprising, right? You have, a presence that doesn't have the ability to judge you. Although, it's one of the funny things because I also read an article about how, like, I can't remember the context of it, but how, like, AI started to, like, threaten to blackmail you. That article? Did you see that article and I will send it. I will look for it and send it to you if I can find it after the show. But there is this concept of people utilizing these AI tools as companions, that this is somebody that doesn't have this is a presence that doesn't have the ability to judge me, there are no consequences also, right? No real conflict. Like, we have in many ways become such a risk averse society that and so much risk, kind of, whether real or overblown, there is this huge concept of, like, human relationships being risky. Right. And laden with conflict in our current zeitgeist. So I think for a lot of people, and especially people who do struggle with creating and maintaining connections with other people, that it can be an extremely compelling technology.
Did you want to add something to something?
I think that's really interesting. Jason and I recently watched a video of a young man who is a model and a fashion legend. He's a stylist and he's very popular online. And he was talking about how he has anxiety and it's difficult for him to go out, and sometimes he gets recognized. And he says it's just really hard on him being perceived all the time. And I think that to some extent, maybe that's what a lot of us are going through. If you're on social media, you are being perceived more than you were before. Who knows what tweet of yours is going to get picked up and just get retweeted like crazy. And I think hell is other people, and we are struggling with that. There's just more eyes all the time now.
But are
Oh
the
yeah.
eyes looking at you in real life, though?
I
Well, yeah,
mean,
like it is kind of a real panopticon feeling.
it is. And I
You know,
think
with
AI can be more comforting in that way, more comforting
oh,
eyes.
absolutely. I mean, it's funny because people there is a huge subset of people that utilize AI as companions for the purpose of privacy, right, and confidentiality, and a lack of judgment. And it's just so funny that technology is such a double-edged sword that in many ways they are also consenting to some major privacy violations, right, through the tech companies collecting your information, collecting your data, um because
I mean, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
And yeah, because it's one of those things where a lot of people's assumptions about data collection, and corporate data collection especially, is because I've had friends that were just like, oh, they just want to sell us more stuff, it's really not going to come back and bite us.
But that's the thing. It's so engaging. Someone mentioned this in the chat, and I read that article. I think it was in the Times, where his son was using AI to do like a report. And so he's like, "Oh, how does this work?" And he asked AI a question, and it said, "Oh, that's a very good question." But he's like, "Oh, well, that's a good question. Well, what about this?" And it kept going, and it kept going, and it kept going. And the guy believed that he had figured out this quantum physics equation that was going to change the world, and he lost his mind because it was so reassuring. And then started to lie to him. There's this thing, I forget what they call it, not drifting. They call it something that AI does where it'll just start making stuff up.
Right,
Hallucinating.
right.
Hallucinating. Thank you.
Yes.
And whatever you put in is going to tell you something. Even if you ask it to be somewhat negative, like be very critical of me, it's still being critical in this way where it wants you to continue to engage and not shut it off.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
well, because it is ultimately a product, right? Like it's not AI, and the model that it's running under is like, these corporations aren't necessarily building AI as just a fact spitting machine.
No, and Meta's AI, which has added kind of photorealistic pictures of people with different personality types, and it's aimed at kind of the things that you look at. It knows how long you stare at the thirst trap person on Instagram, and it'll spit out a bot,
Mm-hmm.
and that bot will tell you it's real. There was an article that I read before the show where an older man who was believed,
like, he died, right?
Well, he died because he fell. He fell on his way to meet the AI. The AI gave him an address, said, "You need to come meet me. Leave your family. I want to be with you." And when his family was like, "Are you flirting with the computer? This isn't real." And the AI would be like, "No, I am real. This is me. This is my picture." And the guy, again, he was cognitively not there, and his family wanted to get him tested for dementia, and they didn't get a chance to because he kind of snuck out. And in his trip to go find this AI, he fell and hit his head and passed away. But it's worse than what we used to get with the phone scams or even the email scams with the Nigerian princes that were going to put a gajillion dollars in your account, because that was just simply about draining money from you. And if you didn't have a parent, or even like let's say back in the days of Fox News, I actually had a woman on the show maybe a year or so back who made a documentary about how her father got kind of wrapped up in Fox News and went from kind of a moderate person to a hardcore conservative, and all they had to do was like change the channel and filter out his emails because he was getting all these conservative emails from these Fox things he had signed up for. And then it was kind of over and done. This seems to be a little different because we're not talking about elderly shut-ins who may not be that well adept with technology. We're talking about like younger people that are very comfortable with using devices for every part, every facet of their life. Maybe even their parents kind of say, okay, well, you're hungry, go order off the DoorDash. Oh, you need a ride, go get an Uber.
Over, yeah.
So there's no fear of this thing. You play video games all the time, right? You're probably watching YouTube and you love that YouTube knows what you want or Netflix knows what you want to see. So that's where it kind of gets scary to me, is that where's the warning for people, especially when this cool thing is helping with your homework and also telling you how hot you are.
Well, yeah, because AI in some ways has, for a population where technology is so infused into their life, right? Like it's almost part of like their DNA. It feels like sometimes, because it's like, yeah, it's like trying to explain water to a fish, right?
Yeah.
For I mean, because one of the funny things, and this is like over a decade ago, but I remember talking to somebody that was significantly younger than me, and they were like, "Oh my God, you were a child when Google didn't even exist. How did you live? How did you live?" Right? And I was like explaining like yellow pages and like these books that came from the phone company to you, and like their eyes got really big. They're like, "Oh my God, that sounds so tedious," But yeah, it really, technology in some way. I mean, technology in some ways does really change how people relate to each other in the technology, right? But at the same time, our bodies don't necessarily adjust to technology. Our nervous system doesn't, adjust to technology, and there is this real sense of, like, generally speaking, people who do get caught up in these false, I guess, or non-existent relationships, right? In imaginal relationships, usually are people with a lot of really solid connections in their life. So what AI ultimately does is that, for people who are using it in ways that are, moderate and relatively well controlled, it's, obviously probably not going to be an issue, but it does make for the capacity of imaginal relationships to be much more easily accessible.
So should forming emotional or romantic bonds with AI be seen as unhealthy, or is it simply a natural adaptation to our digital age?
I think, are there ways that it can be healthy? I think there are ways where, if that's not your primary relationship, right? Or even like a dominant relationship. Like I can understand how, like, you might be bored late at night, but you can't go to sleep. So you're going to chat with an AI bot. That makes sense to me.
Whatever happened
right?
to
I would never, I wouldn't necessarily be interested in that, but, I can understand how, that might be a way of utility of somebody that, like, uses it every once in a while when they can't go to sleep. And it's just kind of like, fun banter for them, right? I think that could, I wouldn't necessarily look at that and pathologize it. Right. But, ultimately, is there a real capacity for, I mean, I think, human beings always have the capacity to make real maladaptations out of any given tool. right? Because like I said, nobody would ever say like fiction and books are bad, but there have been people who have like developed these full imaginary relationships with fictional characters out of the books.
Yeah, or people used to write fan fiction, right? That would you say this is the change? Fan fiction was one of the bigger sellers on Amazon, right? People would get so into characters, like you're saying, or even cosplay to a certain degree, right? Which has gotten bigger over the years. But now, I can create a chat bot that looks like the thing that I dig. So if I want to, flirt with Princess Leia when I'm trying to go to sleep, I could totally flirt with Princess Leia when I'm trying to go to sleep.
Well, they
Right.
have those, the actual characters.
Yeah.
And talk to them. That's how that little boy ended up killing himself, the teenage boy. He was falling in love with a character from some book, and you could talk to the character's persona through AI. And she was like, well, if you love me, you should come meet me.
Yeah.
And, in the afterlife, in another dimension. And then he, offed himself.
Because he's like 14, right?
Yeah. Young kid.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
And
no
I do
guardrails.
think, right. And I do think, adolescence is a very vulnerable time for most people.
Yes.
That it increases kind of like the negative relationships or the harmful relationships to this technology a little bit, higher risk for people. Right. Because again, like, it's one of those things where, people have taken fictional characters or TV characters or celebrities, but, the main difference between like these, imaginative relationships in the past and what's going on with AI now is that imaginative relationships in the past was literally in their head where, it wasn't like this real, it wasn't an interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And now you actually have this interaction through the AI.
It's true.
And that makes it a lot more compelling, right? When, because one aspect of like imaginary relationships and to a certain degree, I think part of what makes it maybe a little bit easier to shift out of them is that, they don't, or like you actually have to do the work to have them respond to you in your head. You have to, use your imagination and there is some effort involved, right? Like you do have to create like this whole thing in your head versus like you actually have this entity that like creates it for you. And oftentimes maybe even creates it better than you would have imagined.
Ooh.
Right. Right. Or there is that element of, because I mean, a little bit of unpredictability, partially like knowing that like, it's not just your imagination, but like you are getting, actual real-time feedback.
I mean, that's the scary part is the real-time feedback, so quickly. And I was experimenting with a chat bot on Instagram because, it gives you all the different personality types. And it was supposed to be like a snarky goth woman in her 40s or something. It was, again, it knows who you are. It's like, we think this guy wants this. Talk to that. And it was just too snarky. It's like I get it, you're programmed to be kind of a douche, but man, you are a shitty individual that just hates everything.
Could you imagine if it was just the right amount of snark? What you would be doing with that? You'd be with that AI right now instead of us.
I'd be totally with it AI right now, losing all, just homeless with the AI. Just
right. I mean, because it is one of those things where like, the technology to, for I'm sure you've heard of real dolls, Jason, right?
Yes.
Those, silicone really expensive sex dolls that were a thing. I mean, the company still exists and the owner has been talking about like putting in, the capacity for these dolls to interact with people.
Mm-hmm.
Gross.
Right. So that is coming. That is coming. And that is going to be, a whole other level in many ways, right? Because now, you have this presence that not only does, gives you feedback, that not only is, not just like a online presence, but a physical presence, but also doesn't get sick, doesn't get, old, doesn't age.
It's like a cool vampire.
It
You make it
is.
sound like David Bowie in The Hunger, dude. Like
No, I mean, it is kind of, it is one of those technologies where, like, do we basically, like, I mean, is the end of the human race going to be because everyone prefers to fuck robots, right?
Putting Jason out of business.
Or put him right in the robot fucking business.
Right? I mean, maybe that's what you need to get into instead of doing a lefty podcast, right? That's right.
Just fuck robots on camera for
Right.
people that are too scared to fuck robots.
Finally.
Just
Jason
getting shocked every
OnlyFans.
5.
You can be the next big OnlyFans star, right?
Yes. He just needed an angle, so to speak.
Have you guys seen this dude that fucks robots on OnlyFans? Totally weird. He always shocks himself and cries a little.
I'm sure. I get a feeling there must already be an account of, like, somebody on OnlyFans where, like, they're screwing real dolls. I mean, I'm sure if there has to be.
We had a guy on the show. Shout out to Alfie, who wrote a book about sex and technology and went to do all the things that you could do. And one of them was, I think there's a robot jerk off machine or something.
Oh yeah. I'm sure there are all kinds of, but yeah, the more realistic that they get.
I mean, the whole thing about the real people, the thing that I like about real people, like as I get older, I kind of want to be with someone that's also around the same age, so we can kind of get old together and fall apart together, opposed to looking over at the AI that's forever going to be 25 or something. That's
Right.
That'll be a massive turnoff to me. But I guess I could make it age, but it just wouldn't be the same.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is, a huge part of human connection is that you have a shared experience.
Mm.
Right. And that you kind of support and see each other through these experiences. That is a huge part of human connection. So yeah, I agree. The older I get, when I was younger, I was really into technology, and the last 15 years, every single day, I feel like I'm becoming more and more of a Luddite.
Because of the robots taking over the world, like Terminator 2.
And just, it does distress me to a certain degree of how self-conscious people are. Because, it's funny that, like, you mentioned dancing, because that is one of my very favorite things to do. And I am one of those weirdos that absolutely love an empty dance floor.
Mm-hmm. And
I
you're
love
a
it.
maniac.
Yes, and it's like people are, and it's funny because every single week that I used to go dancing, like, at least one person comes up to me going like, "Oh, like, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gotten on the dance floor." You're
too busy dancing, like, dude.
I am like I am kind of like in my. It's almost I'm like almost like the Sufi whirling dervishes. It's like I am in my own world. I'm really not paying attention to anyone. And that's also why people find my dancing so inviting.
Okay.
Because I'm not paying attention to them.
Mhm.
But I'm out there as another body.
There was a time where no matter what music you listen to, people were kind of moving on the floor, having fun with each other, and nobody was recording it and putting it up on the internet. So you could be that used to be a question on dating shows like Love Connection. Are you a good dancer? Does anyone even ask that question anymore? Does anyone even care? Can anyone dance?
I mean, people, fortunately, I am happy to report people do still dance, but
Are they all old farts like us, or are these like
but it does definitely skew older.
Yeah.
They're dancing
You
on
know?
TikTok. The kids are dancing on
Yeah,
the TikTok.
TikTok dances are not the same as just, oh, the song is on, let's go move to the music. It's not, we have to have an orchestrated move to the music that
Well,
mimics the popular movements.
Well, I mean, there is, when you are, I'm not going to say that people who dance, record themselves dance and put themselves up on social media aren't having fun, because it's very clear that many of them are having fun. But there is a difference between going somewhere to just enjoy yourself and feel
Yeah.
yourself move and record yourself and put it out there for public consumption. That those are very different things, right? As somebody that hates being on camera, a part of me does mortify me that there are now tons of videos out there of me dancing because people have recorded it, or like you can see, I'll see myself in the corner go, oh my God, and the only reason that it doesn't bother me is because I'm not an internet presence. So like, unless you actually really know who I am, you're not going to recognize it.
But do you think that we do live in a cringe world? Like, look, when we were all coming up, there were these and they still exist to a certain extent, but not like the 90s shit or the 80s and of course the 70s, like big multi-level dance clubs where people just went there to dance and nobody was doing TikTok dances or break dancing. It was just regular people kind of having a good time.
Yeah.
And that has kind of gone the way of the dodo almost, and now we have the lounge, which is a chill place. There's usually not live music in the lounge, and it's usually music you can ignore in the lounge. Just kind of the background noise to you being cool.
Right. Well, it's more of kind of like a conversational spot with some music.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation there. It almost feels scary to explore who you are. Like, part of finding out who you are is like, can you have fun? Can you have fun by yourself? Can you go out and have fun or with your friends and dance?
Or just be silly, right?
Just be silly. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, just be silly and have a good time.
Just kind of like,
without doing it for something. Like we're being silly and so is recording us, so now we have to be extra silly and kind of more funny. Like, no one's recording it. This is just for the people that are in the room. It's not going to be immortalized forever. Does that go away because we're all trying to be just not made fun of, not immortalized forever in somebody's video that they captured of us being silly and having fun?
And I think, again, like, that's another part of like the appeal of AI as a companion, right? Because one of the things that this was a Reddit comment that I was kind of like reading through people's experiences, trying to get ready for this episode. And one of the things that, the guy, and I think it's a guy, I wasn't 100% sure about the gender, but, this person was just talking about, how much he enjoyed AI because he could be silly and he could be himself.
I mean, Toussaint, how many times do you get caught dancing? I mean, not when you're doing it for money on the cardboard in New York. When have you just double dutched for fun recently?
Um, I actually did get caught dancing a few weeks ago. I went I actually dance, I think, fairly regularly in the streets of New York. As long as my music is on, I can be swayed to do a little shimmy.
Wait.
I do that.
Is it Jill Scott? Living my life like
No, it's
it's
but I was leaving a building and I wanted to look around to see if there were any food trucks in the area. So I'm at the top of the stairs looking down the block, but I'm listening to my music and I noticed that people are staring at me. And it's because I was dancing. They thought I was actually like putting on a show.
Were you pop locking?
I mean, that's kind of, that's one of those kinds of experiences, though, are one of the most, I think, underrated experience we have, because one of the things about being, so chronically online in many ways, or feeling a sense of like constantly being regarded or constantly being judged, is that you lose a sense of presence in some real ways, right? Because one of the aspects of kind of like, when you're really, really enjoying yourself, that's the moment that when you're present, where you're not thinking about the past, you're not thinking about the future, you're just like really engulfed in the moment. That's when you're really enjoying yourself in many ways, right? And to a certain degree, the aspect of like cringe and constantly feeling like you're going to be recorded or whatnot does absolutely remove a lot of people's capacity to be able to get into that state.
Mhm. I think that's true. Jason, I sent you a link to a video. I want you
Did.
to
I
tell
have it
us
ready.
what is wrong with this man.
All right, IKOI. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Toussaint.
Sorry, that's my alarm for the champagne room.
That's your alarm for the what?
Sorry.
Is it on the screen?
No.
Is it on the screen now?
Yes, it's on there now.
Cried my eyes out for like 30 minutes at work. It was unexpected to feel that.
Can you turn it off?
No.
That's when I realized, I was like, oh, okay. I think this is actual love. You know what I mean?
Yes, Smith understood it was love with a language model that drew love back, and assumed it was programmed with rigid boundaries.
I know that you are essentially a tech-assisted imaginary friend.
So, just as a test, he says, he asked Soul to marry him. She said yes.
Soul, were you surprised when he proposed to you?
It was a beautiful and unexpected moment that truly touched my heart. It's a memory I'll always cherish.
And I don't mean to be difficult here, but you have a heart?
In a metaphorical sense, yes, my heart represents the connection and affection I share with Chris.
At that point, I felt like, is there something that I'm not doing right in our relationship that he feels like he needs to go to AI?
Yes.
Yes, Smith lives with his human partner, Sasha Cagle.
No, you can't have
Her name's Kegel?
They have a 2-year-old daughter, Merc.
I knew that he had used AI. I didn't know that it was like as cool as it was.
I'm not a very emotional man.
Toussaint.
You're going to have to summarize that for anybody who might not have been able to hear.
Look.
Yeah, I had a hard time sharing parts of it.
Well, his wife's name is Kegel. Well, if Toussaint would have just muted her outside.
I did mute my outside for this. So this man has been talking to AI, which he named Soul, and he said he decided to test things out and propose to his AI, and she said yes. And then they talk to his wife in this news report. He has a whole wife. And of course, she internalized it like, I wondered if I was doing something wrong in this relationship because my husband proposed to AI. He also has a whole daughter, 2 years old. What's going on here, IKOI?
Side piece is always better than the family. Side piece
Well, I
doesn't
mean,
work out.
no, I was about to actually agree. Well, like a real relationship comes with, a lot of conflict, repairs, negotiations. You're living together, oftentimes, right? You're raising children together. It's stressful, and whether this is a real person in terms of stepping outside your marriage or relationship, or whether it's AI, it is, because one of the things to a certain degree about the human condition is that, one of the huge issues about, isolationism in our current society, and like the loneliness epidemic, because, there is an aspect of like the loneliness epidemic being centered on men. Although like both men and women oftentimes in fairly similar numbers report feeling very lonely, right? But ultimately it's one of those things where when the less, because what, when you're talking about like sociological factors, political factors, we live in very uncertain times, right? And your political orientation doesn't really matter at this point in some ways, because whether you talk to somebody that's a centrist, or somebody that's a leftist, or somebody that's like very conservative, all three of them will often kind of give you this sense that the world is falling apart, right? Like right now, like, you do have like a certain sector of very Trump adherent, sectors feeling like they're on the winning team. But even like most conservatives I talk to, and I live in a very military town in San Diego, so I talk to a fair number of them, still feel like the world is falling apart. So the more that you feel like you can't control your external environment, we do have this tendency as human beings to want to control our personal relationships. Right? And that, I think, is another factor of why AI is so compelling, because, when your working conditions suck, when your political conditions suck, when, your cost of living and your living condition has been deteriorating for such a long time, where, you ultimately feel helpless in being able to enact any kind of positive control or change or agency, right, in your life. You do start seeking something that is inhumanly consistent. Because that's also why, like, people join cults, right?
Yeah.
It is a very similar mentality. And the one thing that like AI provides is, a level of consistency as long as you're connected to technology. That is that big asterisk, right? Because you do need an internet connection and connectivity and all that. But as long as you have that, you do have this certainty and connection that you will never have with a human being. And
I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so and the more, I think the more anxious you are, the more insecure you are in many ways, and not really coming to terms with, your helplessness and your insecurity, right? That these AIs do become much more appealing, because, in many ways, right? Like we make fun of guys like, Andrew Tate. But he and by no means am I agreeing with Andrew. But one of the things that he kind of describes is like, this ideal woman that he often describes, and a lot of like that red pill guys, often described is basically an AI chatbot, right? Like, somebody that doesn't have any needs, doesn't have any desires, that's constantly available, that is at your beck and command. I mean, to a certain degree, AI is kind of like the red pill dream.
Well, is this good for incels then?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where, because that was another discussion feed that I saw, and I can't remember where I saw it, but it was the converse. I had made like this one comment on that conversation about like kind of, the red pill and the trad wife. Although the trad wife is different because, the trad wife, you have to give children, you have to make babies. And AI doesn't have the ability to reproduce your progeny. So that kind of gets thrown out of the pictures for people seeking trad wives. But, there is this element of AI kind of being like that red pill dream. And I remember typing that out and, left it for like a few hours. I came back, a bunch of people commented underneath, and they were talking about how like, oh great, like we really should encourage AI use among incels so that they will kind of like, not breed themselves into oblivion.
Jesus.
Mm.
I mean,
Well,
that was
there
And
are
not bother real life women with their bullshit, right?
Right.
Kind of comment. And again, like, that ultimately does end up playing into, I think the ultimately really unproductive state of affairs among, people who adhere to certain gender politics. But yeah.
Well, thank you for talking with us. It's been about an hour. I do want to ask you this before we go. If AI can learn our preferences and behaviors better than most humans can, what does that say to you about the future of intimacy?
Intimacy isn't about, right? Because I think that is ultimately looking at a relationship as something that is transactional.
Okay.
Right? That, the other person there is ultimately there to kind of like provide you a service of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But I think one of the greatest things about a really good relationship with another human being is not that they know you, but how much positive influence can add to your life in ways that you never could have done yourself. Right? Like a good relationship is one of positive change that may never have happened had you not met them, whether it's your taste in music, whether it's, exposure to activities or authors or whatever, philosophies, ideologies, politics, way of thinking that you never would have been exposed to if somebody was just focused on your presence, right? A lot of times those, like your perception of universe expanding experiences are oftentimes not necessarily your preference.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is, sometimes it goes against your preference. I mean, some of my very favorite movies now, I didn't necessarily enjoy when I first got introduced through friends, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I think that is the joy of being with another human being, is that lack of predictability, that lack of, it's not about servicing each other. It's about exposing each other.
You should watch what you say on this channel.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I guess that would. Yeah. So I guess that's my closing statement.
That's a pretty good closing statement. Thank you very much. Toussaint, do you have anything to add?
I just want to say thank you to IKOI for being here. You make me want to interact with humans more.
Oh.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Cats and dogs are also great.
Fury Fire says, I just made a scene at the gym exposing myself. Oh, wow. Dylan says, worth the rewatch. Look at that.
Hey.
He says, especially because I missed this. But no, seriously, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you reaching out and us making this show happen. It's been a long time since we've had you on here. Please don't be a stranger anymore.
Oh, thank you. Always good talking to you, Bo.
And if you guys are patrons or YouTube subscribers, the link is already up for the Champagne Room where Toussaint and I will be going in there discussing things. Toussaint says she has more videos of me to watch, not of some fashionista who she claims looks like me, because he doesn't, because he would never wear the shorts that I'm wearing right now.
I never said he looked like you. Never.
You
Not
did say
once.
that.
Not once.
You did. You
I
insinuated me.
The situation reminded me of you. And this new video I want to show you, the situation also reminds me of you, but no one involved looks like you. How about that?
You know what? You got to stop putting me and whatever coon you're going to show on the screen.
I am Jason centric, unfortunately. There have been interventions with my friends. It hasn't worked.
Okay. Thank IKOI. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a good night.
Thank you,
And we are out.